One of the aspects from the pure business standpoint is that very often those relationships are very one-sided, meaning that one party has more at stake than the other into the relationship. And so when you are not aligned in the way you see the relationship, it's really hard to converge towards a common objective, thus straining the relationship. So that's one of the aspects that you have here that shows that the supplier relationship management can be a bit tricky.
Okay, so traditional approaches tend to lack agility and fail to address complex challenges businesses face today. These approaches, they predominantly focus on transactional interactions rather than collaborative relationships. And they tend to neglect the broader strategic considerations that encourage long-term partnerships.
SRM, or Supplier Relationship Management, has been overwhelmingly been a very traditional approach, very adversarial, if you like, a very binary approach, a numbers-driven approach to supplier management, largely because for so many years now, supply chain itself has been seen as an overhead, as is the case with any overhead. The emphasis is generally going to be one of driving costs down. Coming off the back of the pandemic, we're going to need to find different ways to meet the value targets, because the traditional category managed approach to driving performance is going to struggle. You know, as recession hits, business shrinks. As business shrinks, those predefined, pre-negotiated margins shrink too. The only things that don't are the value targets. They're still up here. So with that, we do need to find different ways to meet the value targets. And our suppliers, they'll probably relish the opportunity. Let's look at today's ecosystem. You've got an increasingly complex business landscape. Okay, with, for example, one country waking up, another country going to sleep, different languages, time zones, different operations, service lines, etc. And that's just the customer. Now overlay against that all of the different supplier interactions. It's a hugely complex place.
The other aspect is also related to the complexity and the number of supplier relationships that procurement has to deal with. And with more and more relationship, it's harder and harder to dedicate a meaningful time, meaningful attention to making sure you're doing the right thing. And that problem is only compounded by some issues with the availability of data and how technology behaves with that, meaning that the buyer finds themselves in a way where they have too much to do and zero insight, and they often sometimes have to struggle to get the most basic data to help them guide the relationship. How often have we as buyer had to go back to the supplier and say, can you help me know how much I'm spending with you, please? Because we have a meeting coming up. That's a huge issue in today's world. You cannot manage a supplier relationship properly when you have that limited an access to data.
So when you try and operate that using traditional methods, and traditional method might mean working very in a performance managed way by looking at, for example, using spreadsheets. You can't manage today's complex environment with spreadsheets. That's number one. That's one big change that's required. But it's also an understanding of the change in attitudes, as I've alluded to earlier on about, driving better relationships, understanding that there are multiple customers in the ecosystem. So this gives rise to many, many different challenges. So attitude is a big one. Understanding that the landscape is changing, understanding that you can't meet the ebb and flow or chaotic, if you like, activity within today's complex environment with static processes.